Hello everyone, it's Theme Park Avenue, I'm Eric, and as asked by Shining Coasters, this is my top 10 most overrated roller coasters I've ever ridden. Before we jump into this list, subscribe to the channel so you know when new theme park content comes out. We do much more than just rankings like this. I also do tier lists, park reviews, and a whole lot more. Now the one major disclaimer is that I will be including defunct roller coasters, and the more important disclaimer actually is that this is subjective. It is my opinion, and the fact that this is called overrated coasters means most of you will disagree with these picks. And if you are watching this video knowingly and you're going to get mad at an opinion, why are you here? I'm sorry to sound a little condescending with that, but I'm trying to mitigate the amount of hate that comes just because I don't like a roller coaster as much as somebody else. Now let's jump into the list. Number 10 is Magnum XL 200 at Cedar Point. I initially had this a lot higher, but then I found out a lot of people don't think it's that great, but there's still a lot who say it's a top 5 coaster at Cedar Point, whereas for me, it's probably number 7. Not super far behind where some put it, but I just think it's flawed. It has good airtime for sure, and I enjoy parts of it, but the valleys, honestly, the bottom of every hill and even the top of every hill is pretty painful. If you stable yourself, you can get a pretty decent ride, but even at Magnum's best, it's a fairly average hypercoaster, and I don't think it's technically a great ride like some say. It's very good, but definitely a tad overrated. Number 9 is Time Traveler. I didn't realize how many people really praise this ride until recently, but man, a lot of people put this in their top 25, and out of my 300 or so credits, I feel like this is probably top 50 maybe, but it's not excellent. The inversions are standout moments in terms of awesomeness. I like the spinning element, of course. It is a very disorienting ride for the most part. The first drop is good. I just didn't think it was as spectacular in a lot of ways as some other rides. Maybe the fact that it's a spinning coaster kind of is to its detriment, because this kind of layout not spinning would be pretty awesome. It'd be less disorienting, but a greater focus on the speed and forces might have done good for this ride. That said, it's still number 2 at Silver Dollar City and still a very great ride, but I don't think it's quite as good as I've heard some people say. Number 8 is Cheetah Hunt. I rode this again recently, and I never thought it was that family oriented, but now it really is. This ride does not have a lot of great forces. The drop off of the Windcatcher Tower is pretty strong, and the final airtime hill is good ejector. That said, the sense of speed is not really existent on this ride. It's more meandering, and that can work on a ride such as The Beast or Superman the Ride, and to an extent it works here. That said, it means the elements really just don't do anything, and even those rides at least have a pretty good sense of speed as they meander through their courses. And I just feel that Cheetah Hunt is not a top 3 ride in the park like some say. I honestly can't really get behind the opinion that this is better than Montu or SheiKra, but a lot of people do feel that way. So maybe I'm in the minority here. It's still the most popular ride in the park for sure, but I just don't think it's a top priority if I go to Busch Gardens Tampa, period. Number 7 is El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. Yeah, I know, crazy, right? Well, here's the thing. It's in my top 25, but it's nowhere near number 1. Many say it's number 1, and there are some elite elements here. The first drop and first few airtime hills, some of the best out there. That said, the middle of the layout doesn't do as much for me, and I feel the ride really does jackhammer. Apparently, I'm in the minority of that, but after 2 accidents happened, I mean, there must be something going on. But I definitely feel that El Toro is a ride that's hard to enjoy parts of. At its best, it's still an amazing roller coaster, but I don't think it's the number 1 at Great Adventure. I prefer King to Ka. I've said that before, and I will continue that sentiment probably forever. I understand why El Toro is a favorite for many, but I think it's a bit overblown. Number 6 is Intimidator 305. To be fair, I have not ridden this in a while, but whenever anyone says it's the number 1 roller coaster in the world, and very few think Millennium Force is better, and I'm one of the ones who does, I guess it has to be overrated to an extent. The big thing that stands out here for me is the fact that it's not as intense as people say. It's draining for sure, but the forces are not really contributing to the sense of speed in the way they do on Millennium Force. First drop and bank turn is excellent, but similar to El Toro, it kind of falls off to an extent after that, and actually to a much greater extent, to the point that it's not in my top 25. That's a given at this point. Maybe I'll go back. It's been 6 years or so, but for now, it's definitely not a top tier coaster for me. Number 5 is X2. El Toro, X2, and One of the Ride are kind of the holy trinity of things I went on this year that I consider overrated. X2 is one that people think is like the best coaster ever, class by itself, extreme. I guess being extreme means it's like excused of all flaws, but X2 is an extremely flawed roller coaster, and very few people talk about that. The first thing is that the final Raven turn is among the most painful moments on any roller coaster for me, and it leaves a sour taste in your mouth after all the awesomeness you'd experienced. The other thing is that the ride kind of meanders in that second half, and I just don't think really any parts are quite as quote-unquote extreme as some say. The first drop is great. The lift hill might actually be my favorite part, just because of how weird it is and the music playing. I like a lot about the ride. Some of the inversions, very weird, but it's very similar to Time Traveler. Granted, I think it's much better than Time Traveler, and as far as where it ranks overall for me, top 40 seems about right. Maybe top 30. But in terms of at Magic Mountain, while many call it the number 1 at the park, for me, it is number 3 at best. And thanks to Wonder Woman Flight of Courage, which I have not been on yet, it might be bumped to number 4. It's still, for sure, a great ride, like many of these. However, it's another one that a lot of people say is a lot better than I think it is. Number 4 is Mind Blower at Fun Spot Kissimmee. This one I don't think people are really calling best of the best by any means, but I don't really like this ride. There's essentially two kinds of overrated coasters. Those people love that I like, and those people like that I don't like. And this one, while the first drop and inversion are fun, at a certain point it's just kind of rough and you're going through the layout and it's not doing a whole lot, and I just don't enjoy it. As far as wooden coasters in Florida go, I guess I have to say it's my favorite. I haven't been on White Lightning yet, but I just don't enjoy the ride that much. Number 3 is West Coast Racers. Going back to Magic Mountain, many say this is Premier Ride's masterpiece. And it could be, if the restraints were not bad. So I do like parts of the layout. Some of the hang time, some of the air time, the dueling aspect. It's a fun ride. That said, the restraints are the absolute worst I've experienced, because the hard plastic corners, because of my height, dug into the side of my head as I was kind of going through the ride. So that's headbanging to an extreme. I don't think I've ever felt that much pain on a roller coaster in my head since I last rode Ed Norla Tag or Flight Deck. So there is good stuff about this ride, but it's one of those rides where restraints really do bring it down. It's still good, but in terms of premier rides, I absolutely prefer pretty much all the other creations. Mr. Freeze, Full Throttle, the Spaghetti Bowl rides, Runaway Mountain at Over Texas, the list goes on. Number 2, Skyrush. Yeah, it had to be on here. Of course it is. Everyone loves this ride, right? A lot of people say it's number 1, best in the world, best at Hershey Park, all that. I'm more of a Park Pros or Airtime Thrills kind of guy. The restraints are bad. They're awful. They're like worse than West Coast Racers probably. But there's more to it than that. I won't dwell on the restraints too much, but they do leave a lot of pain at the end of the ride. But this ride's layout is not as strong as some say. The intensity is overblown, similar to I-305, and the airtime is definitely floater. I hear people say it's strong ejector, and while it is sustained, I don't think you really get thrown out of your seat that much. It's much more gentle lifting, which is alright by me, but that means it's not quite as extreme a roller coaster as some say. The other thing is this ride is extremely short. It feels just as short as Storm Runner, but with more pain and less good elements. So while many say it's the number 1 coaster at Hershey Park, it's my number 4 at the park. It's still a good ride for me, great even. But if any other member of my family were doing this list, I'm just telling you, Skyrush would easily be number 1 overrated, and it's like their least favorite ride at Hershey Park. But this ride, well, has a lot of haters, and that's why I didn't put it at number 1. It's definitely, for me, not as good as people say. Now, the important thing here is that I have just said my worst opinions. So I'm going to make other people seem just as bad by sharing some of their most overrated roller coasters. I put a community post out recently, so here are what some people had to say. No Name 117 Spore said Lightning Rod's the most overrated. Something about maybe not getting evening ride in front row, but they just think the airtime moments were weak floater or non-existent, and it was disappointing. They also say Afterburn and Fury, but we'll stick with the Lightning Rod take for that. I haven't been on that, so I can't really comment. Veda Schneider said, Iron Rattler. The first drop's great, but it's shaky and short. I'll disagree on both of those accounts, actually. I think it's a smooth ride, and it feels longer than most RMCs. So Sugar Cube 5 said easily the Great Pumpkin Coaster. Alright, yeah, I guess that's a bit overrated. It's not that awesome. Kevin Whalen said The Incredible Hulk at IOA. He said it's a ride-related B&M multi-looper. Okay. Oh, he also says Gatekeeper's underrated. That's pretty awesome. But I personally think Hulk is a really awesome ride. I get that it's a bit rough, but it's not that bad, and I still love the intensity. Graham Falsetto said Magnum for a good layout and drop, but it's also rough and hard to enjoy. And yeah, that kind of echoes my sentiments to an extent. Hedgehog Coaster said Icebreaker at SeaWorld Orlando. Ejector was decent, but most of it felt tame and short. Yeah, I guess, because this is a family launch coaster, it's not going to have as much, but I still think it looks fun, though I have not ridden it. Now, Fairy Barf Lettuce said Diamondback. The airtime's nice, but it's not intense. I'll disagree on that, personally, and I also think B&M Hypers aren't really trying to be that intense, but if that's not what you're into, I can see why you prefer Banshee Orion and the Beast, like you said, but I definitely prefer Diamondback to all of those. Apollo's Chariot Enjoyer said Kumba, said the elements didn't do much. I don't know, I think that Zero G roll is still insane. That could have made the list for me, but it's gotten smoother actually, as weird as that sounds, so I think it's pretty good. Josh A said Fury 325. It was underwhelming. Alright, I guess that's fair. The second half, slow. Alright, well I'm going back to Carowinds soon, so I'll see if that's correct, but that's pretty good. Now we got 2 more that are pretty interesting. So Hello Mario said The Voyage, with that emoji next to it, and yeah, I'll let you guys read that one. I don't want to expose that opinion for too many. Now there's one other that I thought was really interesting from CLC Coasters. Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure. It is a great family coaster is what he says. I agree. And he says it's not a world-class coaster, and you know what? I'm with that. It's in my top 100, but I don't think it's really the best of the best kind of thing. I love the theming, but I guess I don't prioritize theming as much as a lot of other people do. Now that's going to be it pretty much. Let's move to my number 1. Oh boy. Volcano the Blast Coaster at King's Dominion. This is the defunct coaster that made the cut, and honestly, I just thought it was awful. A lot of people loved it, but I thought it was rough and slow. The launch is okay, but very headbanging. And the actual layout, it goes around the volcano, which is kind of cool, but it meanders like no other roller coaster. Only Skyrocket 2 can be compared to that level of meandering. And I'm talking about the top part with the slow inversion. So there's not much else to say about Volcano, partially due to my limited footage, but I just thought it was not a great ride, and I'm pretty glad it's gone, and I'm excited to see what they replaced it with. Thank you for watching this incredibly controversial video. I hope you did not hate it. Actually, I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe so you know when new content comes out, and like this video if you somehow did like it. I'll see you next time.